Before John gets started, I wanted to just thank you for coming out today to listen to the GRE information workshop. Hopefully you'll get information, I know you'll get information that will be helpful as you prepare for the graduate school exam. There's been some changes, and if you have questions, please feel free to take advantage of, you have experts here in the room, so ask questions about the process, about the exam, whatever you might have questions about, and take advantage of this while we have John, while we have him here. The other thing before we got started, I just wanted to take a quick minute to ask you if you have challenge that we're doing with the career office. Has anyone heard one person? Two people? Three people? Okay. I just wanted to give a quick plug for that because this is your opportunity. You're attending a workshop, you're attending a session where you're here and you are developing and getting some information that's helpful for you in your career and your future. So we have put together, we've bought prizes, nobody's taken advantage of our prizes or our contest yet, so you guys could be the first one to actually do that. And all you need to do is go to I'll bring the website up real quick if I can spell.
Is there anything you can scan again? Because that was easier than Foursquare.
You don't even have to do any of that. If you're not using Foursquare and you don't want to use the Facebook, if you just go to this website, all you have to do is be able to log into the portal, and then there's a web form. There we go. That you'll click on, and maybe I'll log in so that we can see what it looks like. And literally all you do is fill out 1, 2, 3 sections, and you type in some reflection that you had about today's event, something you learned, and you submit that, and that goes right to our office. So if you're not interested in friending Mac on a job on Facebook and tagging him at the event today, if you don't want to use the Foursquare check-in, this is another way to do it. Okay, so we're keeping track that way. And the final prize is the Kindle Fire. If someone checks in with 10 or more points, we're going to be giving that away. But there's prizes all along the way. So if you're the first one to check in, you'll be the first one to get a prize. So we've got plenty of things that we want to give away. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that too. All right, so I'm going to turn it over and give you the information that you came for.
Oh, okay.
Right. And thank you very much
for
coming out.
Yeah, of course. Hey guys, my name's John Calvello. Were any of you in the last session that I actually just did on graduate school? So I thought somebody looked like kind of familiar. Okay, yeah, and really what I want to do today is just talk about the GRE as a whole, the test, and give you guys a little bit of information of what the test looks like, the format of the test, and give you guys some tips and strategies to kind of walk away with that you can really apply to the test if it's something that you guys are thinking about doing soon. Has anyone taken the GRE in here yet? Same as last time, right? Is anyone thinking about taking it soon? You're thinking about taking it soon? What is your major?
Science.
Oh, okay, so that makes sense. You would have to take that. Yeah, so what we'll do is kind of go through it a little bit and kind of give you guys a heads up on what it looks like and give you an idea of at least how the test has recently changed and what that kind of means for you. So the test just actually changed August, not even like half a year ago or so. So the GRE changed for maybe a couple different reasons. There's kind of two ways to look at it. The first sort of being what ETS says. They're the people that created the test. Stands for Educational Testing Services. They're the ones who put the GRE together. And they just kind of want to say to be more in line with graduate and business school programs. Honestly, I think the real reason they changed is they wanted to be more competitive with some of the other test types, like the GMAT, for example, and really to kind of have schools really keep looking at it. So they actually do end up changing it every couple years or so. So it's not like the first time the GRE has changed. They always kind of make small changes to it. So what we'll do is take a look at how it's changed and really what that means for you. So what we're kind of going to take a look at is there's a little bit of a change in content on the test itself. Definitely a big change in testing profile. There's an entire new scoring system, which sort of freaks some people out a little bit because you don't know how to compare your score. And there's definitely some new strategies that you can use when sitting down for the test. And we'll go through those together a little bit as well. So what didn't change on the test when they decided to redo the test? Who writes the test didn't change. That's ETS. So you're still going to see questions worded in a confusing way. Still the same type of language. That's not going to change. 95% of the math didn't change. One of the biggest changes is really in the verbal section of the test. So we'll take a look at that. The essays didn't change. Where you take the test in different testing centers stays exactly the same. The schools who accept it, that's not going to change either. So you don't have to worry about that. And then the longevity of the scores is going to stay the same, and that's for about 5 years. So if you want to take the test now and just kind of get it out of the way, your scores are going to be good for 5 years. So just sort of know that if you're thinking about it. The biggest change in the test is really the profile of the test, or the way it's kind of laid out or structured. So let's kind of take a look at it. The first section is actually the writing assessment section. So there's 2 essays. That barely changed on the test. So you have an analysis of an issue essay and analysis of an argument essay. What they did for the new test is they kept those exactly the same, and they just cut off 15 minutes. So now each essay is 30 minutes. That's not too bad. The biggest changes really happened in the quantitative and verbal sections of the test. So the old test, you had 1 section of math and 1 section of verbal. The new test, you have 2 sections of math and 2 sections of verbal. So you really jumped up in number of sections on the test as well as number of questions. So the test is actually going to be a little bit longer now. So the test is almost 3.5 hours long. If you're thinking about taking the test, it's something to think about. So on the current test, you have 2 sections of math, about 20 questions in each section, so about a total of 40 questions for math, and a total of about 40 questions for verbal. So the test is a little bit bigger, but it's actually going to be benefit to most people in this room. Going along with the format, the old test is what they call a computer adaptive test, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we kind of go through. And it was about 2.5 hours long, and you could only do 1 question at a time. So you had to answer a question and then move on. You can never go back, you can never change answers. You only do answers 1 at a time. On the current GRE, it's what they call a multi-stage test, which probably doesn't mean much to anyone in here, but we'll go through that. And it's about 3.17 hours long, which is a weird number, but it's about 3.5 hours long. But what you can do in the new GRE is you can actually navigate through your sections and come back. So if you're not sure of how to do a question, you can actually come back and come back to it when you have a little bit more time. You can skip questions, you can change answers. That really helps people take tests a lot. It really lets you be more comfortable in taking the test and actually do a lot better on the test as a whole. Let's take a look at how the current test is going to be scored. There's no changes in the writing section. It's 0 through 6 is how they score the writing. Generally, most schools tend to look at the quantitative and verbal more than the writing. That's certainly not to discredit the writing and saying that you shouldn't do it. But schools generally take a look at the quantitative and verbal sections more than anything else. The GRE is one of the tests that is probably the most interesting out of the 4 main test types, only because a lot of schools sometimes only require you to have a base score. So it's certainly something to look at, even before you take the GRE and see where you're applying, because maybe some schools only want you to get a certain number. If you get above X, then that's completely fine. That's the requirement. If you're in a really competitive program, maybe they want you to do as well as you possibly can. And that really changes how you're going to go in to the test, how you're going to prep for the test, and your mindset for the test. So it's something just to kind of think about and be aware of. But the test is scored from a 130 through a 170 on each section, and each question is worth 1 point. So I think the average is about a 150, which makes sense that people get on the test. So before we really explain how the new format of the GRE works, it's kind of good to take a look at the old format because it makes it a lot easier to understand how the test is structured and works now. So the old GRE, as we mentioned, is a computer adaptive test. So essentially what that means is a computer's giving you the test, and the computer doesn't know anything about you. So you sit down to take the test and it assumes that you are completely average, like everybody else who takes the test. So if you start with math, for example, it's going to say this is a 100% middle of the road math question. Half the people who take this question and get it right, the other half get it wrong. So let's say you get that question right. The computer then kind of recalculates a little bit and says this is a bit of a harder question now. Maybe 60% of people who see this question get it wrong, 40% get it right. And if you get that wrong, then it kind of backs up and gives you an easier question. So essentially the way that a computer adaptive test works is in the beginning it's really trying to see where you fall on a big scale, and by the end of the test it's really trying to pinpoint exactly where you stand. So what's bad about this kind of a test is it really makes the value of the initial questions more valuable than the questions at the end. Because getting questions right in the beginning really help you fall on this big scale. Questions at the end are really trying to pinpoint your exact score. So there are definitely some things that aren't great about computer adaptive tests. Luckily for everyone in this room, they just changed the test. And it's now what they call a multi-stage test. So it still works a little bit like a computer adaptive test, but a lot more towards everyone's benefit. So it's actually computer adaptive by section. So what that means is you have 2 math sections now. So if you do incredibly well in your first math section as a whole, your second math section is now going to be a little bit more difficult. What's good about this is you can actually jump around within your math section, change answers, skip questions, come back to things. In a computer adaptive test, you can't do that because each individual question directly affects the next question that you're going to get. So it's a little bit easier to take the test now. It gives you a little bit more freedom. You can really kind of take tests the way that you like taking tests better. So that's something to think about too. Let's actually take a look at the math section of the test. So the way the current GRE is kind of set out is it's between multiple choice, select everything that applies, and for the first time numeric entry we actually have to calculate an actual number. They never had that before, so you actually have to calculate something on the test. The content stays the same, which is really a big focus on algebra and geometry. Those are probably the 2 biggest sections of the math, and arithmetic. I think they're the 3 biggest sections, which sounds easy, but can be a little hard if you haven't seen it or thought about it for a while. And question types tend to be problem solving, quantitative comparison, numeric entry, and for the first time you actually get calculators on the test, which I never had before. So that can be kind of an exciting thing. So I actually have a couple different problems to go through. You guys can tell me what you think. I think you've probably seen them before then. But I have new ones that I'm sure you would love to do. So we'll take a look at the first problem that we have. So what is the remainder when 2,208 is divided by 11? You have a calculator, so this is something that you can obviously use. Does anyone have a guess what the answer is? Sorry if I'm making you do math and you didn't think you would. It's not that hard, I promise. Does anyone have a guess? I'll help you. They're really looking for you to do like 5th grade math. So the answer is going to be 8, right? Because the remainder is 8. So what this question is sort of designed to do, not that it's an incredibly hard question, they're going to give you harder questions than that, is really just to take a look at the vocabulary that they're going to use. They're going to say things like remainder, quotient, product, prime, things that you just maybe haven't thought about or read in a long time. So sort of to give you an idea, they're going to use a lot of math vocabulary on the test. And that's something to be, kind of aware of and know. So you know exactly what to do when they give you a definition in a sentence. Let's take a look at the second question. So it has A, 4 to the 16th, and B, 16th to the 4th. And so the way this question is generally set up is they have answers listed below. So A will say everything in column A is greater. B will say everything in column B is greater. C, they're both equal, or D, there's not enough information. Does anyone want to try this one or know what the answer is? Anyone at all want to just try it? All right, well, is there anything in common about both of these numbers? About A and B? What's that? Right, by 4. So really what you want to do with a problem like this is make it as easy as possible for yourself. You have a calculator, but you can't use it because the number's humongous and it just says error. And you could do this on your scratch paper, but you don't really want to sit there and do 4 times 4 16 times. It sounds terrible, and it's a good chance that you'll make a mistake doing something like that. So what you can do, if you remember your rules of exponents, which you may or may not remember, you can actually pull a 4 out of the 16. And what you can do with exponents is, if you pull out a 4, you can actually add that to your exponent. So you end up having 4 to the 8th. So then, which one's bigger? Or what is the answer going to be? Right, because they look exactly the same now, and you end up saving yourself an incredible amount of time and really making it as simple as possible. And that's one of the biggest tricks of the GRE, is kind of taking things when they look really confusing and making it as simple as possible for yourself. All right, let's do another problem. This one might be a little easier. What are the greatest and smallest positive differences between any of the factors of 210? And usually when people see this, they just start listing every single factor they can think of 210. But what you want to do is just really see what the question's asking, right? So what is the smallest factor of 210? 1, right? And what is the largest? 210, right? So what are the greatest and smallest positive differences between any of the factors of 210? So what is the greatest positive difference between the smallest and largest? The largest difference between it? 209, right? So because you have 210 and you have 1, so the first part is 209. So what you want to do is immediately cross off anything that doesn't have a 209 in it, right? You want to save yourself a lot of time. So obviously it's not going to be 103 and 1, it's not going to be 210 and 1, it's not going to be 103 and 11, so you're really only left with 209 and 0, 209 and 1. One of the things we recommend for students to do is use your scratch paper and literally write out A, B, C, D, E, and cross off the answers that you know aren't right. Because you actually end up spending a lot of time saying no over and over again in your head, and we don't want you to think about them ever again. Because now you know for a fact it's either going to be 209 and 0 or 209 and 1. Does anyone know if it's 0 or 1? Which one?
B.
It's going to be B. Why do you think that? So it can't be 0, because if it was 0, it means the number would have to be a perfect square, right? So like if it was 16, 4 minus 4 would give you 0, but they're both factors, right? So it would have to be 1, and because it would be 1 and 2, so it would give you 1. Does that make sense? I have lots of math for you guys. Sorry. See this coming, right? So there's 2 columns again. You see lots of problems set up this way. So column A has 6 plus x, and column B has 6 minus x. And again, you have the quantity in column A is greater, the quantity in column B is greater, the 2 quantities are equal, or there's not enough information. So when you see something like this, it might not be this simple, but it's a great example of a way to starting place. You want to make it as easy as possible for yourself. Does anyone know what you want to do in this situation? Just plug a number in, right? Just pick a number. And make sure you pick something that's really easy. A lot of times people just pick a crazy number, and I don't know why you would ever do that. So just pick something like 2, right? Makes your life super easy. You know exactly what a 2 can do. You can do it in your head. So 6 plus 2 is 8, right? 6 minus 2 is 4. So if we look at the answers, column A is greater in that case. Column B obviously can't be greater because we just said that it wasn't. They're obviously not equal. And so we know for a fact that it can't be B or C. So it either has to be the quantity in column A is greater, or the relationship cannot be determined from this information. Is there anything we can do that would affect the outcome? Right. So what you want to do is something with outliers, where it's using a really large number, or if you want to do a negative number, they might be able to change the answer. And they have lots of questions like that, sort of like designed to trick people. So if you obviously put in a negative number, what happens? Right, the number's reverse, right? So then all of a sudden it can't be column B is greater because we just proved that it wasn't. So it has to be there's not enough information given. All right, I think this is the last one. Actually, there's one more after this one. So this one just sounds terrible to read it out loud. So if A is 60% of B, B is 40% of C, and C is 20% of D, then 6D is what percent of 20A? It just like sounds terrible, right? There's a lot of percents and letters. But they sort of give you a clue about how to make this problem easier right away. So you have to pick a number, right? So you have to find something to make D, essentially. What would be a good number to pick? There really can't be like a wrong answer. Yeah?
2.
could pick 2. Do you think there's an even easier number? Almost 1, but what about 100, right? Because the whole entire thing is dealing with percentages. So if we want to just leave it in percentages, it makes it really easy. So 1's close, I mean, almost the same thing. So I mean, that's certainly a way to do it. So you want to just kind of take whatever clues they give you and kind of use that to your advantage. So making D 100, it's a lot easier all of a sudden to figure out, well, what is 20% of 100? Right? It's going to be 20. And then they give you a calculator so you can do a little bit of the harder calculations if you don't want to mess them up in your head. But then right away you can see that 6D, if we made D 100, is 600. And 20A, if we figured out that A was going to be 4.8, is going to be 96, right? Does that make sense so far? So that's not really what they're asking yet, because they really want to know 6D is what percent of 20A. So without doing anything, it's obviously going to be an incredibly large percentage, right? Because we know that 6D is 600 and 20A is 96. So if they're saying 600 is what percent of 96, it's going to be a huge number, right? So you have a calculator, and then we can obviously set this up to solve for X. So we'd obviously set it up solving for X, and then this is where you would plug the answer in for 625. So this is something new they just added on the GRE, where you actually have to plug in a number yourself. They never had that before. So you would literally type 625 in as your answer. And this is the last one, I promise. I don't know, I thought this was coming. For which of the following values of X is X squared over 4 plus X squared plus X over 2 minus 3 between 0 and 4? So one of the things this problem does for you is it gives you every single answer, right? It has to be one of these answers. It could be more than one, but at least they give you the information. So you can figure out the answer. It's really easy. So what would be a great number to start with? Because we have to plug something in for X. What number do you want to start with? 1. You want to start with 1?
1.
How come?
So I'm kind of rule that out if it's not, or it is okay.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. So, I mean, you said the right thing. So you want to just start with 1 just to rule it out, right? So then why wouldn't you want to start with 3? Because if you can rule out that 3 is too small of a number, you don't ever have to try 1 or 2. Does that make sense? So a lot of things on this test are really to save yourself time. So you could obviously pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and plug them all in and figure out which ones work, which ones don't. But it's a time test, and you want to save your time for something you think is a little bit more difficult that you really need help with figuring out. So you want to start with 3. And since we don't have calculators on us, I can just tell you the answer is 0.75 when you plug 3 in. So that's pretty close to 0. So chances are 1 and 2, you can kind of just see where it goes. That's probably not going to be the chance, because you're really close to the 0, because you're looking for numbers between 0 and 4. So what you would do is go ahead and plug the 4 in, and you get 3. And it's such a big jump that you know that 5 would be too big of a number. So literally with only plugging in 3 and 4, you don't have to waste time looking at any other numbers. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, I'll leave you guys alone with math. That was enough. So we'll take a look at the verbal side. So the way the questions are set up on the verbal side is there's going to be multiple choice, select all that apply, or select in-passage responses. And question types are reading comprehension, text completion, or sentence equivalence. So let's take a look at a couple of different samples that we have. So reading comprehension, I really feel like it's everyone's absolute favorite, or the part they hate the absolute most. Does everyone like reading comprehension? And by like, I mean your favorite part on the test. Anyone's least favorite part? Yeah, I think it's the worst part. The good news about reading comprehension is the answer's there. They have to give you the answer. So you can find the answer right in front of you. The bad news is they sort of can never pick a side in what they're saying, so it's always just text saying just something. It never has an argument. And it's always kind of pulled out of the middle. So you're going to have to read something about the societies and shamanism that have been flourishing, and it's probably not your favorite thing in the world. It could be, but chances are it might not be. So what happens is students, it might be their favorite part, but they end up rereading this for every single question. So you probably read it 5 times. And that's a big waste of time. So you don't want to be reading that 5 times. What you want to do is read it once and then get what you need out of it. So for large passages, we have something that we recommend that students do. We call it the 2-1-1-F rule. And what that means is you read the first 2 sentences, you read the first sentence of each paragraph, and then you read the final sentence. And you have to take notes on that. But that generally, about 90% of the time, gives you all the answers. So instead of rereading it 5 times, which you probably forget by the time you're finished reading it, take notes on it the first time while skimming it, and then you're going to be able to have your answers, so you'll be all set. So we actually don't need to sit here and read this out loud. I'm just kind of save you guys from that a little bit. Let's take a look at text completion. They usually have 2 words that they do too. So what you want to do is actually kind of read this, read it to yourself obviously, and then we'll kind of figure out what words work. But I'll read it out loud a little bit. Altruism is thought by some to be a purely human trait developed during our evolution as a tribal species. However, studies of other animals blank this notion. Chimps will adopt orphan infants, and many species of birds will warn others at the risk of exposing themselves when a predator approaches the flock. These displays of animal altruism blank that animals other than humans also evolved to exhibit this trait. So this little clip gives you a really big clue. We actually call them trigger words. Does anyone know what that word might be? If there's one word in this whole little paragraph that can help you, what do you think it's going to be? It's going to be however, right? So when you say however, that means the opposite of, right? So then what you can kind of do is, if you're not sure what belie means, maybe you haven't seen that word, you're not familiar with it at all, so plug in some of the other words then. So conform, right? So you're saying the opposite of. So studies of other animals conform this notion. Does that mean opposite? No. Right? How about promote? Does that mean the opposite? Other animals promote this notion? No. So even if you don't know, you understand the trigger word means you're looking for the opposite, so it's going to have to be belie. That kind of makes sense? Okay, what they want to also do too, there's lots of other types of questions that involve more than one answer just to make things tricky for everybody. So what we'll do, we'll read the sentence and then we'll kind of see which words make sense. The president of the company was shocked when he arrived at the quiet boardroom the day after the stock market crashed. Rather than exhibiting outrage, the members of the board were completely blank. So what we really recommend for students to do is use your scratch paper and put a word down that you know 100% makes sense. So what word would you write at the end of that sentence, not looking at the words that are up there? What word do you know 100% makes sense in your own head? Anyone have a guess? Yeah, calm, right? That makes sense. They were calm. That's the opposite of what he was thinking. So what you want to do is have calm and then sort of compare it to all the other words. And since there's a chance that they might want you to find 2 answers, usually what happens is one of them is a great fit and one of them barely fits, but it works. So sort of keep that in mind too when you take the test. So how about calm next to impassive? What do you guys think? Like, maybe a little bit? No? Okay. How about histrionic? So if you don't know what that word means, sort of look at it. I mean, does it look like a calm word with the ending that it has on it and everything? Does it sound like a calm word? So if you didn't have a clue, just like, no, it doesn't sound calm at all. It sounds terrible. How about stoic? Definitely, right? That one, for a fact, literally means calm. So we know that one's good. Impassioned? No, that means the opposite, right? How about empathetic? It doesn't mean calm. Fetid? It actually means like dirty. It just kind of looks that way too. So you have to pick one other word aside from stoic. So you have to guess one of those. Which one would you pick? Anyone have a guess? Right. Like, it's not a perfect fit, but like it could make sense. And that's really one of the things you have to look at, because they're always going to find one word that for a fact is a definite. Like stoic is the one, like, you know, this means calm. And impassive is sort of like, I guess, doesn't mean they were crazy. So you can sort of use that one to your advantage. And then for the writing section, there really was not a change. It's really kind of like a general prompt. So they're really just kind of to see if you can just kind of put together a strong response. I mean, it's really how they're grading you. So really looking for like a strong introduction, maybe like 3 points that really fit the requirement, then like just obviously just a few paragraphs. You don't have to write anything insane. If maybe you have a 4 or 5 paragraph good answer to any of the essays, that's really what they're looking for. One of the things that I would say just kind of stay away from whenever you're answering one of these essays is just kind of stay away from quotes, because when you use quotes, they really want to make sure that you get them like perfect. So unless you know the quote 100% for a fact and can really explain it, you can use it, but I would generally recommend just kind of staying away from quotes. So this is just an example of what a sample issue might look like. But really they're kind of looking for you to just make your case and really kind of explain why this is the right answer. So you don't really need to do too much practice for the essays. I mean, as long as you can really express what you're trying to say. That's an argument. And really what we'll do, just one of the biggest things that we tell all of our students to do, more than anything else in the GRE, is process of elimination. That saves you so much time on this test. You'd be really surprised how many times students say that's not the right one over and over again, and you should never look at it again. And it saves you an incredible amount of time. So what you want to do is actually write down the answer choices on a scratch paper and cross them out. That way you don't have to think about them again, you don't have to rework them. Once you know they're done, because you end up second guessing yourself a lot of the time. So just make sure that you use process of elimination and cross them out. Now that you can skip and come back, you should definitely do that, because you couldn't do it before. And a lot of students, if you hate algebra, you haven't done geometry in a long time, skip that. You don't want that to be your first question. Skip it and come back to it. That's how normal people take tests, and it helps a lot. And definitely use your scratch paper. That's really one of the things that we do for students that come into our class, is just getting them in the mindset of using your scratch paper for everything. That's really one of the biggest mistakes that students don't do, is they sort of just try to do things in your head, and it's really easy to make a simple mistake, and that usually they have that answer there. So if you forgot to carry something, or if you have to add something, you added something wrong, they usually have that wrong answer. So always use your scratch paper. It's going to save you a lot during the test. So there are definitely some good things to think about when you do take the test. So do you guys have any questions for me about anything, about the test, about classes, anything I can answer for you guys?
The skipping that you mentioned, that's just to reiterate, within each section. Once you move on to another section, you can't go back to the previous.
Correct. So you have 2 math sections. So within your first math section, you can skip around within that section. Within those 20 questions, you can skip around. On your second math section, you can jump around, but you cannot go back to your first section. Sure. And just so you guys know too, one of the things that we've actually set up this year on campus is, if anyone is interested in doing a course, taking anything online to help prepare, you actually get 20% off any of our courses, whether it's online, you do something in a classroom, whatever you guys want to do, a math boot camp that we had online, you guys just get 20% off. Okay, well if you guys don't have any questions, thanks a lot for doing some math, sorry.
Specific books that you think are better to help with preparations? I know a lot of people just like going to Borders or Barnes & Noble or whatever and standing in the aisle. And
yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, like, we have the books, you can buy the books that we get in the classroom, you can buy them separately, but it really depends on the kind of person that you are. So, I mean, you can certainly buy the books and look through problems, but if you're the kind of person that needs to make sure you actually do them, that's really what we have a class for. So if you know the teacher's probably going to call on you and ask you how you did your homework, it's going to make you put a different mindset into doing your homework than just doing it on your own. So I mean, that's sort of something to think about, like what kind of a student you are, and if you need that extra push to do all of the problems in the book, or just kind of having them on your own. But you can buy the same books that we have in our class in Borders or in the bookstore.
What about going in to actually take the test? What do they allow you to take in with you? Anything? Or
Yeah, it's actually well, you've taken the test, right? So what did you think when you went in?
I brought nothing in.
Was it kind of intense? And yes, it's really intense for no reason, it almost seems like. Would you mind sharing what it was like? Just because it'd be kind of cooler coming from you since you just did it than me telling everyone.
Yeah, I walked in, I put everything in the locker. Everything. Walked in, got checked by those, just to make sure you have nothing on you. Got pencil, got scratch paper, sat on a row of computers, just did my test.
Did you get headphones? Did they give you headphones? You didn't? No.
Just test, and when it was a break, a 10-minute break, left. Back in 10 minutes, and the next section all over again.
Yeah, so like it seems like almost like you're getting on like an airplane or something. It's like so intense. So this is something to think about. The test is, I think it's like 160 now. Is that how much you ended up paying for the test?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like $160 to take a test.
I see you have a take a practice test on there, on your list. I know you have on your website, you have the ability to do a free practice exam at any point.
Yep.
That's obviously something you would.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend doing it, because what I would do is look at what programs you want to get into and see if they require you to take the GRE at all, first off, because you don't want to do it if you don't have to. See if they have like a baseline score. A lot of schools offer that, like maybe just have to get above a 150 on the test, and then it doesn't matter what you get after that. And then some scores, you know, you really want to get as competitive as you can, because they're really big major. Everybody's trying to get into it. So first off, I would kind of think about that a little bit before you do anything, and then I would take a practice test just to see where you stand. Maybe you don't need help. Maybe you just need a little bit of help. You can do it on your own. Maybe you want to take a class. So it's really good to give yourself a benchmark just to see what you're doing and kind of what to expect the day that you walk in to take the test. Because you really want to get the most out of it. I mean, it's 3.5 hours long and it's $160. So, I mean, you don't want to do that again, right? So it's something to think about. You guys have any other questions for me?
We're actually going to do a free practice exam on campus here, just kind of set it up in the computer lab here in Loyola. The date's on the flyer up front. It's a Friday in March. I don't remember the exact date. But using Princeton Review's website, we're going to offer you guys an opportunity to kind of come in and have that somewhat realistic, you know, setting of being in a room with the lines of computers and just have your scratch paper and pencil and really kind of process through doing the exam. So we'll do some registrations for that in the next couple of weeks, but you'll have an opportunity to actually do it on campus as a group to kind of get some of that real experience. Gabby, did you take the practice exam?
Yeah, I took it twice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you guys have any questions that you just want to like ask me and come up, you certainly can. And if you do want to take advantage of that 20% off, the promo code is literally Immaculata20. So if you just put that in on the website, you get 20% off. So something to think about if you do want to do any kind of prep work. Thanks.